The knocking came at midnight. Not the polite tap of a neighbor, but the desperate, frantic pounding that makes your heart stop. Marcus Chen froze halfway through loosening his tie, his penthouse, silent except for that sound. Pound, 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 echoing through the hallway. He'd lived in luxury for 15 years and never once had someone knocked on his door past 9. His hand hovered over the handle as a small voice pierced through the wood. "Please, can you fix our door? Mommy's scared." Marcus's blood ran cold. What he found on the other side would change everything he thought he knew about success, family, and the real meaning of being a neighbor. If you love stories that restore your faith in humanity, hit that like button right now and subscribe to Hopeful Stories, because what happens next will absolutely move you. Marcus Chen didn't open doors at midnight. As the CEO of TechVance Industries, he'd built an empire on calculated decisions, risk assessments, and the kind of discipline that required boundaries. His penthouse apartment on the 42nd floor was his sanctuary, the place where Marcus Chen, the billionaire, could finally breathe without shareholders watching. But that voice, that tiny trembling voice, shattered every rule he'd ever made. When he opened the door, he found a little girl no older than 7, wearing pajamas covered in faded butterflies, her feet bare against the cold hallway tile. Her eyes were red from crying, and she clutched a stuffed rabbit missing one ear. Behind her, the door to apartment 42B hung at an angle, the frame splintered, the lock dangling uselessly. Marcus had never even known anyone lived there. "Please, mister," the girl whispered, her voice breaking. "Can you fix our door? Mommy's scared, and she won't stop crying." Marcus's throat tightened. He'd negotiated billion-dollar mergers, fired executives without flinching, but this child's desperate hope undid him completely. "What's your name?" he asked softly, kneeling down to her level. "Emma," she said. "Emma Rodriguez. We just moved here last week. Mommy got a job at the hospital. She's a nurse, but tonight a bad man tried to come in." The words hit Marcus like a punch. He glanced at the broken door again and felt something primal surge through him. Not the corporate warrior, but something deeper, more human. "Where's your mom now, Emma?" She pointed inside the darkened apartment. "She's sitting by the window with the phone. She called the police, but they said it would be hours. She keeps crying and saying she's sorry we came here, that she made a mistake. Marcus stood, his mind already working through solutions. "Emma, I'm Marcus. I live right here." He pointed to his door. "I'm going to help you and your mom, okay? But first, I need you to take me to her." Me to her. The apartment was a mirror image of his own layout, but it might as well have been a different world. Where Marcus had floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the city skyline, imported furniture, and original artwork, Emma's home had mismatched furniture that looked secondhand, cardboard boxes still unpacked in corners, and curtains that didn't quite fit the windows. But there were touches of warmth his place would never have: children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, a small vase with grocery store flowers on the counter, photos of Emma at different ages clustered on a side table. This was a home built on love, not money. In the corner by the window, a woman sat hunched over, her nurse's scrubs still on from her shift, her phone gripped in white-knuckled hands. She looked up when Emma entered, and Marcus saw the fear flash across her face when she spotted him. A strange man, tall and imposing, entering her broken home at midnight. "Mommy, this is Marcus," Emma said quickly. "He lives next door. He's going to help us." The woman stood defensively, positioning herself between Marcus and her daughter. "I don't need help. The police are coming." But her voice shook, and Marcus could see she was barely holding herself together. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said gently, keeping his distance, hands visible and non-threatening. "I'm your neighbor in 42A. I heard what happened. I know you don't know me, but please, let me help secure your door tonight. You and Emma shouldn't have to sit here afraid." She studied him for a long moment, and Marcus saw the calculation in her eyes, the same calculation every single mother makes when weighing trust against necessity. Finally, she nodded, exhaustion winning over caution. "It's Ms. Rodriguez, Sophia, and yes, thank you. I'm sorry to bother you so late." Marcus made 2 phone calls. The first was to his head of security, James, who arrived within 20 minutes with a temporary security door and installation equipment. The second was to his personal attorney, who groggily answered and listened as Marcus explained he needed information on tenant rights and building security protocols immediately. While James worked on the door, Marcus sat with Sophia and Emma in their small living room, learning their story in fragments. Sophia had moved from Arizona, leaving behind an abusive ex-husband who drained their savings and left her starting over at 35 with a daughter to raise alone. She'd taken a job at Metro General Hospital, working night shifts to afford this apartment in a building that was supposed to be safe. The broken door had been her breaking point, the moment when all her careful planning, all her hope that things would get better, had seemed to crumble. I saved for 2 years to afford the deposit here, Sophia said, staring at her hands. I thought this building, this neighborhood, would be safe for Emma. I thought we'd finally be okay. Her voice cracked. I should have stayed in Arizona. At least there I knew which dangers to expect. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Here was a woman who'd risked everything to give her daughter a better life, working herself to exhaustion, and the system had failed her. Meanwhile, he lived in luxury just 20 feet away, completely oblivious to her struggle. He'd congratulated himself on his success, on how far he'd climbed from his own humble beginnings, but somewhere along the way he'd forgotten what it felt like to be afraid, to be vulnerable, to need help and wonder if anyone would come. Sophia, he said carefully, you didn't make a mistake. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met, but you shouldn't have to do this alone. She looked at him with surprise, then skepticism. You don't even know me. No, Marcus agreed, but I know what it's like to be scared. I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you. And I know that sometimes the only thing that saves us is someone showing up when we need them most. James finished installing the reinforced door at 2 in the morning, refusing payment and promising to return the next day with a permanent solution. And Marcus walked him out, then returned to find Emma asleep on the couch, her head on her mother's lap. Sophia was stroking her daughter's hair, tears streaming silently down her face. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means. But Marcus thought maybe he did. Looking at Sophia and Emma, he saw his own mother, working 3 jobs to keep him fed after his father left. He saw himself at 8 years old, scared and confused, wondering why life had to be so hard. He'd become successful to escape that feeling, to never be powerless again. But he'd also become isolated, surrounded by wealth but disconnected from the very humanity that had once saved him. Sophia, he said, I want to help more. Tomorrow, actually today, I'm going to talk to the building management about security improvements for the entire floor. This shouldn't have happened, and it won't happen again. She looked up at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. Why would you do that for us? You don't owe us anything, Marcus smiled sadly. Maybe I'm doing it for me too. Sometimes we need reminding of what actually matters. As he walked back to his penthouse at 3 in the morning, Marcus couldn't sleep. His designer furniture suddenly looked cold, his achievements hollow. A little girl's voice echoed in his mind. Can you fix our door? Mommy's scared. She'd asked for something so simple, so basic, yet it represented everything broken in a world where people could be neighbors without ever truly seeing each other. The next morning, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 5 years. He called in late to work. Instead, at 8 a.m., he knocked on Sophia's door with coffee, breakfast pastries, and a plan. When she answered, still in yesterday's scrubs, looking exhausted but surprised, he held up the bags. I thought you might not have had time to eat. Can we talk? Over coffee at her small kitchen table, Marcus learned more. Sophia worked 12-hour night shifts, Thursday through Sunday. Emma stayed with an elderly neighbor on those nights. A kind woman named Mrs. Chen, no relation, who charged almost nothing because she loved the company. Sophia was drowning in medical debt from Emma's asthma treatments, student loans from nursing school, and the costs of relocating. She made decent money, but it vanished as fast as it came, leaving nothing for emergencies like broken doors or security upgrades. I called the building manager this morning, Sophia said, her voice tight. They said they'd send someone to look at the door next week. Next week, Marcus. They don't care that someone tried to break in. They don't care that I have a 7-year-old daughter. Marcus felt anger burn in his chest, not the controlled corporate anger he wielded in boardrooms, but something raw and protective. What's the building manager's name? he asked quietly. 3 hours later, Marcus sat across from Gerald Hutchins, the property management director for the entire building complex in Hutchins' corner office downtown. Marcus had learned that morning that he didn't own his penthouse. He'd never bothered to buy because he'd planned to move to something bigger, better, more impressive. But that morning, he'd made an offer on the entire 42nd floor, all 12 units. The offer was accepted within an hour. Gerald Hutchins now worked for Marcus Chen. "Let me be very clear," Marcus said, his voice the same one that made executives tremble. "Every single security deficiency in this building will be addressed within 30 days. New doors with reinforced frames for every unit. Security cameras in all hallways. A night security guard at the lobby desk. And you will personally oversee this project. Am I understood?" Hutchins stammered agreement, and Marcus left feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not satisfaction from a business victory, but genuine purpose. He was using his power for something that mattered. But Marcus didn't stop there. Over the next week, he learned about the other residents on the 42nd floor. There was Mrs. Chen, the widow who watched Emma, living on a fixed income that barely covered her medications. There was David Okonkwo, a graduate student working 3 part-time jobs to afford rent while finishing his doctorate. There was the Patel family, immigrants who'd arrived 2 years ago and were building a new life with determination and grace. These were his neighbors, and Marcus had lived among them for years without knowing they existed. He'd been so focused on ascending to the top that he'd forgotten to look around at who was climbing beside him. He began showing up. He helped Mrs. Chen carry groceries. He offered David a paid research position at Tech Vance. He connected Mr. Patel with business contacts that could help his struggling consulting practice. And with Sophia, he did something that surprised even himself. He simply became present. Not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a neighbor, a friend, someone who showed up when he said he would. Emma recovered quickly from the break-in scare, especially after Marcus installed a child-friendly security system in their apartment that she could control herself. A button by her bed that would alert him immediately if she ever felt unsafe. She showed him her drawings, told him about school, and slowly, Marcus found himself caring about permission slips and spelling tests and whether Emma's favorite color was still purple or if she'd switched to blue. Sophia was harder to reach, her independence and pride creating walls that Marcus had to respect. But slowly, through shared morning coffees and evening conversations in the hallway, she began to trust that his help came without conditions or expectations. "Why are you doing this?" She asked him one evening, 3 weeks after the break-in. They were sitting on the floor in the hallway between their apartments while Emma played nearby, drawing with the expensive art supplies Marcus had accidentally bought too many of. "I mean, really? You're a billionaire CEO. You could be anywhere doing anything. Why are you here helping us?" Marcus watched Emma carefully shading in a butterfly, the same pattern from her pajamas that night, he realized. "When I was 8, he said slowly, my dad left, just disappeared one day. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, and I remember being so angry at the world. Angry that other kids had dads, angry that we never had enough money, angry that my mom cried herself to sleep every night thinking I couldn't hear her." He paused, surprised by how much this hurt to say out loud. "One winter, our heat got shut off because Mom couldn't pay the bill. It was freezing, and I was sick with pneumonia. Our neighbor, Mr. Harrison, he heard me coughing through the walls. He paid our heating bill, brought us food, made sure I got to the doctor." He didn't have much money himself, but he showed up. Marcus looked at Sophia, and she was watching him with understanding in her eyes. Mr. Harrison saved us, not because he wanted recognition or because he had some agenda. He did it because it was right, because we needed help, because we were his neighbors. I became successful partly to honor that, to never forget where I came from. But somewhere along the way, I did forget. I forgot that success isn't measured in dollars or deals. It's measured in moments like these. He gestured to Emma, to the hallway, to the simple act of being present. "You asked me to fix your door, Sophia, but really, you fixed something in me that I didn't even know was broken." 6 months later, the 42nd floor had been transformed. Not just with new security measures, but with community. Marcus had sponsored floor dinners every other week, where neighbors who'd lived feet apart for years finally learned each other's names, shared meals, told stories. The building that had been a collection of isolated boxes became something alive, connected, real. Marcus's penthouse, once a showpiece of wealth, now regularly hosted Emma's homework sessions, Mrs. Chen's book club, and impromptu neighborhood meetings. He'd learned that the best investment he'd ever made wasn't in technology or real estate, but in people. Sophia got promoted to nursing supervisor, finally earning enough to build savings and plan for Emma's future. Emma thrived, surrounded by a village of adopted aunts and uncles who celebrated her victories and supported her struggles. And Marcus discovered that the best part of his day wasn't closing deals or seeing his company's stock rise. It was hearing a little girl's laughter in the hallway, knowing she felt safe, knowing he'd been there when she needed him most. On the anniversary of that midnight knock, Marcus organized a small gathering. All the floor residents came, and Marcus told them the story. How one little girl's bravery in asking for help had reminded him what truly mattered in life. Emma asked me to fix a door, Marcus said, looking at the community gathered around him. His real community, not the superficial network of business contacts he'd called friends before. But what she really did was knock down the walls I'd built around myself. She reminded me that success without compassion is just loneliness wearing expensive clothes. That wealth without generosity is poverty of a different kind. That we're not truly living unless we're living for each other. He looked at Sophia, who was wiping tears from her eyes, and at Emma, who was holding Mrs. Chen's hand, and he felt something he hadn't felt in decades, complete, not because of what he'd achieved or accumulated, but because of who he'd become. "So thank you, Emma," he said, kneeling down to her level like he had that first night. "Thank you for asking for help. For being brave enough to knock on a stranger's door at midnight. You saved me just as much as I helped you." Emma hugged him tightly, and in that moment, Marcus Chen finally understood what his mother had tried to teach him all those years ago, that the measure of a person isn't in what they have, but in what they give. Not money, though that could help. But time, presence, compassion, and the willingness to show up when someone is scared and in need of a neighbor who cares. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Hopeful Stories, because everyone deserves to be reminded that kindness still exists, that neighbors can become family, and that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is ask for help when we need it most. Thank you for being part of this community of hope.